Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, depending on when you're watching this video. This is Mr. Messina here to chat with you about how and why cells need to reproduce. Now, cellular reproduction is a big deal, actually. Cells have to reproduce in order to produce new organisms and to repair old ones. Now, that's a really long statement for this kind of base concept of in order for us to live as eukaryotes, being multicellular, we need to replace some cells. Like you lose skin cells all the time, you lose cells out of your gut, out of your stomach. You actually replace your red blood cells, you replace 2.4 million of them per second. A red blood cell, by the way, guys, only lives about 120 days or so. So that means every 4 months or so, you get an entirely new set of red blood cells. Now, in order for a big organism like us to survive, as well as in order for a little organism to actually pass on its genetic material, it needs to reproduce in some manner. In order for a population to increase, doesn't matter if you're single-celled or if you're multicellular like we are, you absolutely positively need to reproduce. Now, how this actually works is all cells have to come from other cells. You can't get a cell just randomly popping up from nowhere. So all cells need to come from another cell. The first cell, the original cell, is called the parent cell. And you can actually see that right here. This would be our parent cell. This is the very first cell that we're talking about. The new cells that are created are the daughter cells. So one parent cell will break up into two different daughter cells. So the original is the parent. The new cell, or the cells that are created, are the daughter cells. So where did the first cell come from? Typically, you have some kind of origin of life kind of situation. For humans, that original cell came from a combination of a sperm and an egg. For other organisms, those cells may have come from, heck, hundreds of years ago, actually. Just a whole line of cells that are being produced and produced and produced. Where did the absolute first cell ever be? Where was that created? That's an excellent question. Now, there are two main types of reproduction, and a lot of organisms actually can do both of them. The first type is asexual. You need only one parent, and all prokaryotes definitely do that, and some eukaryotes do as well. The second type is actually sexual. Sexual requires two different parents, and most eukaryotes actually pull this sexual reproductive system off. So you can see in our first figure right up here, you can have one parent cell. It goes through this process called mitosis, where it splits apart and it eventually ends up as two separate cells. Now, that's asexual reproduction. That's this right here, asexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, you have two different parents. So in this image, this is actually sperm meeting an egg. The egg is this thing right here, that big sphere looking deal. And all these little wiggly looking things, they kind of look like this. Those little things, those are the sperm. The sperm come from dad. They come from a male human or elephant or whatever kind of creature you are. And these eggs, they come from females. Or you can also think of it as the sperm come from dad or men, and the eggs come from moms or women. Many organisms, like I said before, they can in fact do both. It just depends on what kind of organism that we're talking about. Now, asexual has some distinct advantages and disadvantages as opposed to sexual reproduction. First and foremost, it's very fast. It doesn't require a whole heck of a lot of time. Asexual reproduction is the way to absolutely positively just split and reproduce as fast as possible. The issue, though, is it produces clones. So if you need the same cell over and over and over again, like you need a lung cell or you need a stomach cell or a blood cell or something like that, you want something that's absolutely identical to the original. Asexual is the way to go. This is kind of a double-edged sword. So where it's very fast and it's really awesome for producing clones, there's very little variation, very little change. So if you encounter something that absolutely destroys one type of cell, there's no real way for you to reproduce and come up with something better because there's very little variation. This process is called binary fission. So one cell splits into two. So in this case over here, this used to be one cell, and then now it's split off into two different cells. You can see that's happening kind of down here. This looks like a picture of yeast. So these two cells right here originally used to be one cell, and now they're splitting apart. That splitting apart is called budding, where the daughter cells sprout off the parent. And you can see this image right here. That looks like it's about at the tail end, but you can see it beginning right over here. You can see some of these daughter cells budding off of the parent cell. Now, sexual reproduction, this is a lot different. This requires specialized cells called gametes, and these two gametes combine together and go through a process called fertilization. It's a lot slower. Sexual reproduction takes a lot longer. It requires two parents, like I said before, two parents, whereas asexual requires only one parent. Sexual reproduction is a lot slower, but there's a lot of variation as a result of it. So if you ever wonder why, like, you might look like your mom, or look like your dad, or look like your brother, look like your sister, or something like that, that's because of sexual reproduction. There's a lot of variation, so you may look similar to, but you don't look exactly like them. Because you look similar, you know that you're related, but because you don't look the same, you do not look identical, that means there's some kind of genetic variation. This allows species to adapt faster and to adjust to all kinds of different things, from predators to environmental factors to dealing with food shortages, things like that. This increased variation allows species to adapt faster, and we'll talk about that more next semester once we get into evolutionary theory as well as genetics and heredity. Almost all eukaryotes are capable of reproduction asexually as well as sexually. Mainly because in eukaryotes, we need to be able to adapt and change a little bit faster. We have a very complicated environment that we're living in, so we need this kind of genetic variation so we can reproduce. That being said, we also all need to keep cells around that actually are functioning and doing what they need to be doing. So we need to be able to reproduce asexually, just like you don't want all the kinds of crazy, weird muscle cells. You want all your muscle cells that are functioning to be functioning, so they need to reproduce asexually. Now, there's two different types of main cells. There's somatic cells, which are all other cells. And then you have sex cells, which are used in multicellular sexual reproduction. So, sperm and egg, meaning sperm here, and then eggs here, these things are sex cells. These are also known as gametes. Gametes. Those are used only for sexual reproduction. Absolutely only for sexual reproduction. Sperm there, egg is here. Anything that is not used for sexual reproduction, just like these cells over here, they're somatic cells. That's what they're called. All right, nice short video. That's all I got for you right now. Tune in next time. We're going to talk about mitosis. This is Mr. Messina signing off. Have a pleasant day, evening, night, whenever you're watching this.